Good morning, dear colleagues. Today I will show you a short abstract from my lesson, which is devoted to the topic food and science. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Zенчук Irina, and I am an English teacher at NIS department. So this particular lesson contributes to the following learning objectives. So thus, by the end of the lesson, learners are supposed to ask and respond with appropriate syntax and vocabulary to open high-order thinking questions on a range of general and curricular topics, including some unfamiliar topics. And also, we decided that the following listening objective will be appropriate for this lesson. To be more precise, it's 12L2, where students would be able to understand specific information in unsupported extended talk on a wide range of general and curricular topics, including talk on a growing range of unfamiliar topics. In order to achieve the following learning objective, the following lesson objectives were identified. It is supposed that the majority of learners will be able to ask and respond questions about food and science. Moreover, these questions should be high order if it's possible. The next one is that learners will be able to listen to and ask the question about the ways food can be preserved. And lastly, and it's like an additional or extra lesson objective, is that the learners will be able to use and apply the idioms. And also the following language objectives were identified. So learners will be able to use idioms correctly, and also learners will be able to use subject-specific vocabulary. More precise, it's vocabulary connected with food and science. So as the starter activities, learners were suggested to do the following. So on the PPT, they were shown the following pictures, and they were asked to think or to brainstorm and try to answer the following questions. So whether they can think of an idiom that matches this picture. And here, we as a teacher, we need to give a support or scaffolding to the learners, because some of the learners can confuse and think that this picture is basically represent only scalp, whereas according to the teacher's guide, they need to understand that it's not only a scalp, but since it's an open scalp, it's somehow connected with brains or mind. And also, in addition to this, they see a lot of different types of fruit, and like this, after some discussion, maybe sharing ideas in pairs if it's necessary, learners understand that the idiom that represents this picture is feed one's mind. Learners try to guess what is the meaning of this idiom, and in case that they are not able to do that, they are asked to consult with a special vocabulary dictionary of idioms. So the next activity is going to be connected with the following question. Since the learners identify the idiom, now they are asked to discuss different or various ways how they can fit their mind. And of course, considering the fact that they are students, they come up with the idea that basically it's through their studying. That is why they're asked to do the following activities. In their pairs, or if it's possible in small groups of 3 or 4, they're asked to run their school subjects according to extent they feed their mind, and of course specify why. Again, teacher needs to clarify that it's not the students' own preferences, but it's the way or the extent how the subject feed their mind. Teachers should not correct the students because the answer should be quite different. Thus, in one group, in my personal class, I received that it's global perspectives and project work is on the first place, that as the subject that feeds their mind the most, since it develops global citizenship and the sense of internationalism. However, others group told me that it's maths because it develops analytical and like critical thinking skills. So, however, both of these answers were correct, and as soon as learners were able to specify or justify it. In order to put students closer to the topic of the lesson, they are asked the following questions. So, what do they associate with the word feed? And of course, after a while, the majority of learners will come to the idea that this is the word food. And just as the matter of the general discussion, learners are asked the following speaking questions. Are there any types of food which we should not eat too much of? Most probably here the answers would be quite obvious. So these are like the types of food that contain a lot of fat or fast food, junk food, and maybe some learners would mention something about carbohydrates. However, here teachers listen to the answers and make some notes. The next question is, how important is it to be careful about what we eat? Of course, a lot of learners, and the majority of them, would give quite justifiable reasons, maybe give us some examples from real life or from the life of someone they know very well. The next question would be, so do you think that the quality of food is better now or not so good as in the past? Again, here the answers could vary, and that some students can argue that nowadays the quality of food is much lower than it used to be due to the development of junk food industry or fast food industry, whereas others could support the idea that basically the types of food that people eat now are better because they became more concerned about health. Again, here it's just the preferences of like students' own preferences. And the next question, just to come closer to the actual topic of the lesson, so what is the connection between food and science? And there you can give more time for discussion for this, maybe about 7 minutes, and just try to ask students to make a list of all the possible things that students can associate with the connection between food and science. And basically, ideally, they should come with the theme of the lesson, which is frozen food. Learners, before going to the main activity, learners are asked to brainstorm and think about the following questions. So they are asked to imagine the hypothetical situation and to discuss. So, what would they do if they knew that tomorrow the world would run out of food? And here, so most probably the answers could vary a lot. Some of them could use their sense of humor and tell that they will go and steal everything around them, but the majority most probably would come with the idea that they would try to preserve food somehow. So, and based on this, the learners would be asked to watch the following video. Firstly, they only watch it, and they are asked to make a note about how the food can be preserved. As an extension activity, it could be suggested that before watching the video, learners could be asked to make the list of their own ways, how to preserve food. Maybe they are familiar with that. It depends on each class, so the teacher can adapt this. But basically, there are two types how this activity could be conducted. First one is that when the learners make their own list and just compare it with the video, or the second one is when the learners watch the video beforehand and then they are completing the notes about the types of food preservation. So after watching the video, the learners could be asked to discuss and to tell about different and just to compare the list they made with the previous notice.
Microbes are responsible for creating some of our most enjoyable food products, such as cheese, bread, yogurt, and of course, beer. But other microbes, such as Salmonella, Listeria, or E. coli 0157, can do us a great deal of harm. In the UK alone, there are more than 10 million cases of gastroenteritis each year, a concoction of symptoms such as nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and stomach pain caused by eating and drinking food contaminated by microbes. Since ancient times, we have done our utmost to keep them out.
If you leave fresh food lying around, one of the first things that happens is that microbes land on it, and they start to deteriorate the food over time. And one of the worst things they can do is start to produce toxins that can be poisonous to anyone eating that food. And the ancients discovered a very, very long time ago that one way to stop this is to try and preserve food.
They used a variety of methods, such as salting, drying, icing, pickling, smoking, and fermentation for beer, cheese, and bread, all of which we still use today.
You can deny microbes water by turning the food very sugary. for example, making jam. Or we can put salt on our food, and that's why people used to salt meat in the days before refrigerators to stop microbes from growing. One of the characteristics of microbes is that they're very sensitive to temperature. Many of them don't like cold temperatures, many of them don't like hot temperatures. And so we can preserve food by changing its temperature. And one way in which we do this is to put food in a refrigerator. We also boil food. That's a very common way to preserve it. And the way in which that's working is to kill microbes that can't really grow at high temperatures.
Boiling doesn't kill all the microbes, just most of them. Some bacteria are actually resistant to the temperature of boiling water, which is 100 degrees Celsius. To get rid of them, you need to raise the temperature to about 121 degrees, but you can only do this by heating water under pressure. A common method of food preservation using this technique is canning, which was developed by the French confectioner Nicolas Appert. In the 1790s, Appert began experimenting with ways to preserve foodstuffs, succeeding with soups, vegetables, juices, dairy products, jellies, jams, and syrups. He placed the food in glass jars, sealed them with cork and sealing wax, and placed them in boiling water. And then there's alcohol and acid.
Many microbes can't survive alcohol, whereas yeast can, which makes it an effective form of preservation. Acid conditions, such as vinegar or pickling, are also inhospitable environments for microbes.
Pickling to keep out microbes is responsible for some of our most famous brands. In 1922, in Burton, Staffordshire, Cross & Blackwell produced the very first jar of Branston pickle. 28 million jars of it are now sold every year, still keeping out the microbes as it did 90 years ago.
One thing you have to remember is that if you refrigerate food and the microbes on it, you only slow down the growth of the microbes. You don't actually kill them.
So, when you get back from holiday, all might not quite be as you left it.
So right after that, the learners are asked to be divided into 3 groups. It could be done in different ways. It depends on the teacher's own preferences. Firstly, they could be asked to divide according to maybe some cards with a different type of food preservation, and like this, they would use a particular method of food preservation, or it could be students' own preferences. And then within their group, using the video that they previously watched, if it would be necessary, they could watch this video again. They are asked to make a flow chart that represents a particular way of food preservation. And like that, after a while, so you devote about 20 minutes for that. In addition to the video that they watched, they can use their own resources, maybe make a small research in the internet, and then each group presents the way of food preservation. And finally, as their plenary activity, learners could be asked to discuss a various way of food preservation and understand the most beneficial way of food preservation, and of course giving the explanation why they think the food is preserved. So follow the link below, and there you could find the video for the different types of food preservation. So this one was the abstract from my lesson that I suggest to conduct on the topic from food and science or frozen food. Thank you for your attention.